people are still joining, but we'll kick off. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for those of you that are joining us live. And hello to anyone that's watching us back on record. Welcome to the 2023 UK Awards Showcase. My name is Danielle. I'm Director of Global Events at PRCA. I'm delighted to be hosting today's session, and I'm joined by three brilliant panelists who have expertise and experience both in judging awards, but also, of course, entering their own award-winning campaigns and entries. So I'm joined by Phil Kaplan, who's founder of Broadcast Revolution, Joe Carr, who's co-founder and Chief Client Officer at Hope and Glory, and Ishtar Schneider, who is Director of Health at Debenham. So the event today is really a chance for you to get top tips and best practice for tackling this year's awards entry process. In terms of how it's going to run today, I've got some questions just to kick off the conversation. But as I say, this really is your chance to get ahead of the game and put your best foot forward. So please do pop your own questions or comments in the Q&A box and the chat box, and we'll get through as many of those as we can as well. Okay, so to kick off, I'm going to just start with what's probably the most burning question for everyone watching, which is, of course, what makes a winning entry, and how does anyone make their entry really stand out in what can be some quite kind of crowded categories. So Phil, if we kick off with you, any thoughts on top tips on an award-winning entry?
Thanks, and thank you for having me. I think that one of the main things for me when I judge award entries is a mistake or a misconception that coverage is king. The best coverage for whatever category that you enter means that that's the best award-winning entry. And for me, that's just totally wrong. Coverage is a part of it. And so for me, the golden nugget is the impact of a campaign. So funnily enough, just out with a client for lunch, we were talking about award entries, which was a nice little warm-up for today. And she was explaining how across 3 big pieces of coverage that we delivered for their client, it drove huge amounts of traffic, and they can isolate it specifically around that. And so for me, being able to have nuggets like that are stepping stones towards providing a good award entry. And you've got to, for me, start at the end. What have you delivered? As I say, not coverage, really. Coverage is means to an end. But what have you delivered for that campaign as far as impact? And then work it all the way back and then tell the story, but starting at the end and working backwards. So for me, that's the most important thing.
Right. And Ishtar, what about you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with Phil. I think, it's really important to say, okay, what was it really trying to achieve? I think sometimes because we're so in the work, we know why it was important to do this, what the problem was that we were trying to solve, and we kind of forget to tell people why this was innovative, why this was important. So I think having that, what I always start with kind of like what was the magic about this campaign specifically, right? Because we're all doing great work, but what was that thing that really set this apart from anyone else? And yeah, having those smart objectives and linking them to, okay, what did you end up with at the end? How did you exceed those objectives and the metrics that you were aiming for? What was the flow on impact from that as well? So I think that's all really important. But I would even take it a step back and say, I always say, get someone who wasn't involved in the work to read it, right? So put it all together. But when you're super close to it, you often think what people are taking away is something different. And so I would get someone who, didn't work on that client, might not even be in that, in this part of the business, right? In a completely different sector, to read your entry once it's down on paper to say, okay, is what I want to stick with people coming through? And I think that's a good place to start, because sometimes we overcomplicate it, or we try to make it sound really great, but we get bogged down in the details. And I think keeping it simple, keeping it really easy to understand, I think that's a good tip, is really make it easy for the judges to see why this is a winning entry.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We do have some niche categories as well, and I guess not to just expect the judges to necessarily be experts in that particular, area as well. So making it clear to them why you're doing a great job and why, that campaign or entry deserves to win. Jo, how about you? Any top tips on what you think an award-winning entry looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's not much left to say, really. I think Phil and Anishta have covered it, but I would completely agree it's about a compelling narrative. We are storytellers, and I think your award entry needs to tell a very clear and very compelling story. And completely agree, it has to be about the metrics. What was the impact? That's key. But I think also, what was the insight? Why did you have this idea to begin with? How is it kind of, I guess, rooted in either human truth, or why now? Why did you, why does it deserve to win this year? Because we've all worked on campaigns that are great bit of work, but there's a difference between like a normal great bit of work and a really brilliant piece of work. And I think I would enter the ones that you would think, I remember that campaign, I talked about it in the pub with my friends, that had a bit of a legacy. So I would do that bit of kind of due diligence. I think the other thing, actually, to build on Ishta's point is don't worry too much about the detail. And I think what happens is when you're close to a campaign, every twist and turn, I mean, you feel it very keenly, don't you? The drama that, the challenges aren't necessarily challenges for the campaign, but they might have been personal challenges to get something over the line. And I think sometimes people can make the mistake of putting that all in there, and you don't need to. I would strip that back. Yes, talk about the challenges to the sector or to the client, but we don't need to know the granular detail. And actually, most of the time, you wouldn't know that there might have been a bit of personal drama trying to deliver something. So I think you can edit. You don't have to tell us everything. I would, feel free to edit.
Brilliant. And I would say from my side, actually, just seeing the judges' comments and the scores that come through, and just being really careful to make sure you're looking at all the areas which are scored on. So, for example, for campaigns, we've got strategy and research, creativity, execution, effectiveness and results, and making sure you're really answering those 4 points, because the number of times I've seen good entries, but judges can't necessarily score in a particular area because it hasn't been answered, and that's such a shame when an entry is so strong in another 3 or 4 areas. So make sure you look at the toolkit and are just answering all those points within your entry.
I would absolutely agree. I would say that it's such a shame when, because judge what's in front of us, right? So if we see sometimes the campaign is a bit lackluster when you read the entry, but then, I'm thinking about, the people categories or the agency categories, but if they scored strongly enough to get into the, interview round, and then they honestly, when the person is in front of you, they just pop, it becomes so much better, and they pop up the page, they tell you all these things that should have been in the entry but weren't, right? But it's really hard because all we can do is judge what's in front of us. And so I would really think hard about, what is the story, to Jo's point, like what is the story you're trying to tell, and what is going to, help you show up well.
And again, just to build on what you were saying, Danielle, structurally, because I think that's really, really important. PRCA is great because it gives you its structure. 5 fields, 10 points, that's what you're getting judged on. So for as much as what we're saying is absolutely right as far as telling the story and putting it down on plate, you've also got to make sure you get your points where they're on offer. Evaluation, you can only get 10 points. So there's no point writing chapter and verse on that because it's still only 10 points. And so I think it's just really important. And a lot of what we say, I like to think is sort of pointing the obvious out, but this especially, follow that structure. Make sure that you're scoring highly across all of them. In the end, experience says that when it all gets a bit tight and tied, it's the impact at the end that really wins the day. But to get there, you've got to make sure you score across everything, like you say, from research and insights, creativity, etc.
Brilliant. And just on measurement, because you all mentioned that, and I think that's one area that potentially some entries struggle a little bit with. Can any of you give any examples on good examples of measurement? What are sort of the metrics that are really being looked at within entries? Jo?
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean, I think Phil covered it in that, we talk about coverage, but that's only kind of the output. I think what judges are looking for really is the outcome. So that might be sales numbers, it might be changes in behavior, it might be changes in legislation. It's like what actually happened as a result of the campaign. Now, I'm conscious that not every campaign is a behavior change campaign, and some things, don't always follow it through, but usually, if you work with your client and in combination with them, there are some nuggets that you can share that shows that the campaign kind of moved a dial one way or the other. The other thing that you can do, and we do with at Hope and Glory when we're entering awards, is sometimes we do pre-campaign research and post-campaign research. So if you know you've got a winning idea that you think you're probably going to do well, actually doing some research, quantitative ahead of a campaign about sentiment, and then actually doing some research afterwards can be helpful too. So that's another tactic that sometimes people use. They look at pre and post research.
Yeah, I would say as well, it just because you have a small budget also doesn't mean that you can't show up well in those categories. I would say, in the first bit, kind of the pre-campaign stuff, if it's around insights and research, like if you did a load of desktop research, or you did a bunch of focus groups, or, or you did, you didn't pay for, a big piece of pre-research, that's fine. Just tell us that you did those things, right? Because we don't know that you've done that, that work to inform the insight unless you tell us. So I would say, don't be afraid to to mention that. You don't have to belabor it, right? But let us know that was what you did to inform how you got to that strategy or that idea. Yeah, and then I think on measurement, I would echo what Joe says, but I think it definitely comes down to the impact for your target audiences. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be mass coverage, right, or huge behavior impact. Like sometimes the campaigns that really resonate with me or that I score the most highly are, we were only looking at this specific target population, but we really made a change for this this population. And so, it might be quite niche actually, but this is a very effective campaign for that niche population. So I think just be, it saw the problem and it designed the campaign and it solved the problem, or, solved the problem. So that would be my tip.
And just to build on that, I think one of the questions I believe PRs don't ask enough of their clients is why. And so the amount of times when, we'll get a brief and we'll say, what's the campaign objective of this? What's the business objective of this? And the answer, unfortunately, is to get coverage. Now, whether that's specifically in my field or not, the premise is really important, which is the pushback has to be, but why are we doing this? What do you want to achieve out of this? And so, I'd like to think more often than not, but if you don't have those answers, to be asking the client for that, to know what we're trying to strive towards, that therefore, when it works, is what's building your award entry.
Brilliant. And we've focused quite a bit on the campaign entries. What about, obviously we've got individual and team categories as well. Is there anything in particular for those which would make, for example, an agency stand out in a team award category? Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, it's an interesting one, isn't it, with the agency category? I think you have to look a little bit hard at the year that you just had and say, is this our year? Because it's tempting to want to enter every year because we're all doing lots of great things. I think we get a lot right, but sometimes you have a BAU year, and sometimes you have a stellar year. And I think it's just working out the differentiation between those two, if that makes sense. And we will, as a judge, look at numbers. So if it's been quite flat or it's gone in the other direction, maybe this isn't your year. So I would think financials are quite important. And then just looking at where you've moved things forward. And that might be across the client work that you've done. It might be across your people policies. But I think being conscious that you've got new things to say, because otherwise, you could be tempted to enter every year. But I don't think that's always appropriate. So I think I would just be a bit hard on yourself, really, and ask yourself the questions that a judge would be asking.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I did the leader category last year, and I think it was really tough. There was a lot of really amazing submissions, and I think what ended up being a deciding factor for the judging panel was whose year is it this year, right? These are all amazing leaders. Whose year was it in 2022? And so I think it's exactly what Joe has just said, but it came down to who had why was it this year, their year? And so I think I think it comes down to the numbers, but also the impact. I think for some of the agency categories, it's about the business results, but it's also about what are you doing to support your team? What are you doing to impact the communities, right? That you are working in, your clients. How are you taking things forward? What are you doing that's different than everyone else, right? So as you say, it's not a business as usual year. It's an extra special year. And that's not to say that you can't win multiple years in a row, but I think you just have to evolve the story as you go along, right? Because also a lot of us judge awards, multiple years. Well, we might see yours multiple years. And so I think that's the kind of thing where if we see the same entry again, I want to see like, what have you done differently? How have you moved it along? How have you, built on your success, basically?
Yeah, I think it was interesting last year judging one of the agency categories, and so many impressive agencies. And so, as Joe sort of says, like a lot of agencies could enter every year, but actually, when you're judging it, to Joe's point, sometimes you can just look like it's a bit BAU. And so, actually, what ends up happening is it gets scrutinized so much that it's like, but who's actually delivered and achieved above and beyond this year that makes them the standout winner? And so, and again, even for the campaign categories, don't just enter for the sake of entering. Decide, is this above and beyond? Is this, beyond BAU? If this is just a good campaign, great. But is it an award-winning campaign? Is this an award-winning year? Coming back to, the agency award, if sustainability is important, if diversity is important, well, nobody's going to question you saying it's important, but what have you done in the last 12 months to move your agency along in that field, rather than saying, we know this is important and we value this? Like that, for me, that's not good enough. What have you done in the 12 months? So I think that's a really important thing. As judges, I suppose that's what we're here to say, is like, what are the insights? That's really important. What have you done, not what have you talked about doing?
I agree. And I think, I've done the diversity category for several years. And I think, that it's a really good point that, a lot of the time people are putting things in and we're like, yes, that is good, solid work, but is that standout work? That is what everyone should be doing, right, as a baseline. So I want to see, what are you doing that's above the baseline, that is like really shining above the rest?
As events director, I'm going to disagree and say everyone should be entering every year. Keep on entering. Not really joking. No, there's good points. And yeah, we've got also the sustainability team category, which is only started last year, so it's the second time. And again, I think, as you say, it's an area which there's a certain amount of expectation now anyway. So it's more like, what are you doing to stand out, rather than just sort of what's expected kind of the industry as a standard anyway. We've got a question from the audience asking, will you ever use AI to help with the judging process? Like to provide presets for each one if there are loads of entries to get through? And would this have any impact on how an entry should be formatted or structured? We don't use AI at the moment. We're not that, that advanced. But yeah, maybe actually it's just worth us taking a minute to talk through what the judging process looks like. So the first round of judging is all done on our awards platform. So judges are sent a link and can score over a couple of weeks at a time that's convenient to them. Under the areas of criteria, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, which you can see within the toolkit. So that's sort of the first round where initial scores are submitted. Then from that, there's a second round of judging where head judges meet to discuss the sort of top scoring entries from that first round. And that is very much, it's a Zoom call, but that's still very much a sort of people process where, judges will discuss who they think should win and why, and it can be a bit of a kind of back and forth process as well. So yes, no AI yet, but who knows the way things are going. And just on that, in terms of sort of first round, second round, do you see, obviously as we said, sort of the first round, it's important to hit those criteria, make sure that judges can score within each sort of under each umbrella. When the head judges come together to discuss the entries, what does that look like? Can it change sort of what you kind of go into the room thinking is going to be the winning entry? Phil, maybe you can tell.
No, massively. The way I run my little group is I get everybody to give me the scores, and then I create a league table across. Normally, there's 4 or 5 judges, within that category, and then that shortens the list from, let's say, 30 entries down to, again, depending on the scores, let's call it 5 to 10, depending on how well they're scored. And then you get into the weeds of it. So the scoring and making sure you're hitting your category, the different scores is really important. But then overall, it's like, so which is better, which stands out more? And your point that you allude to, the top score doesn't always win, because once you actually discuss it and compare and contrast, then you can come to a different decision.
It also helps with those like neck and neck ones, right? Where you might have like 3 campaigns that have, either a point difference between, or all have similar scores. And, it comes down to what you put in your entry, that really stood out for the judges, because, I know when I read an entry that I feel really strongly about, I'll go into bat for them, right, in those conversations, and I'll say, like, this is why I think this was really strong. And equally, that happens, on the reverse side. So someone might feel really differently about that. So I think it is, it is a process of kind of listening to what the other judges think, but also, kind of fighting for the ones that we think are the winners. And so it kind of is an iterative process, I guess.
I think from my perspective as well, I think there are 2 things to remember. One is that you need your entry to be able to be, summarized in a quite straightforward way. So if I'm playing back what was that winning idea, that actually somewhere in the entry, whether that's the summary or at the beginning, you've got an elevator pitch. I think that's important. The other thing is that the judges do their homework. So they will look at your entry, but if it's a campaign that you like, I mean, you'll probably go and have a little bit noodle around on the internet and see what, whether you might remember it from the time, but if you haven't, you'll want to kind of see where did the coverage land. And while that won't always work, because sometimes the impact is not necessarily coverage, but I think expect your judges to want to do a little bit of their own homework as well. So they'll look at what's in the entry, but often I've been on a judging panel call and people will say, well, yeah, I read about that, but actually when I went and looked out a bit more about it, I couldn't really see the impact it was having. So people go beyond, I think, what's written on the page from a judge perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that as well. I've been on some judging calls with team entries making certain claims, and then judges have gone on to kind of dig a little deeper on just even going on websites, and you kind of think that doesn't quite align with what's being said. So yeah, definitely, it's not necessarily, they're not just going to read the document you submit. So yeah, make sure everything aligns for sure. There's another question here to Ishtar, saying, Ishtar said, evolve the story looking past tense. Does it make a difference to look into the future and show how the story can evolve? So any thoughts on that, Ishtar?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just speaking personally, I think that does make a difference, right? I think, if you can show that this, for example, this campaign was, say, a pilot, right, at the beginning, or this is the first round, but it had such an impact that, the client is expanding the campaign into the next year, right? Or you're looking at how you can evolve it to continue that. I think, seeing that it's past just one moment in time, right, or a certain time period, I do think that is strong, and that's an indicator for me that this was a worthwhile endeavor. The clients feel that way as well, right, or the business feels like that. So I don't think it's it's a must-have, but I do think where you can show that this isn't just like a drop in the ocean, right? It wasn't just a pretty campaign for pretty campaign's sake. I think that that can only help you.
But I think if you took it from an agency perspective, I think I would put the emphasis on show, not tell. So yes, I think you can hint about what might be around the corner and what might be happening in 2024. But I think as a judge, you're also looking for what are the tangible pieces of evidence that you met your goals around, whether that's diversity or sustainability or creativity this year. So I think it shares your ambition, but also show us the workings out a little bit and tell us what you've done to date.
Yeah, the evolution only works if it was strong now.
Okay, brilliant. And we've talked about all the good stuff. What about the bad stuff? So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see with entries? Is there anything you would say really people should try and avoid including or doing when entering awards? Phil, maybe we can go to you first.
Yeah, I think firstly, make sure it's award winning. Sorry for speaking out there, but if it's not award winning entry, if it's just a regular piece of work, why waste the money? Sorry, PRCA, but that's my view. And then again, make sure to Joe's point that it's memorable enough that a judge who's read 30 awards can go, this is what it was about in 3-4 lines, because a lot of them you get lost in it. I'm not gonna lie, many times I doubt myself reading an entry going, have I missed where they've done something? And I've read it, reread it, reprinted it, and actually, believe it or not, it wasn't me. It was that the entry just didn't have any central campaign, or it had no results or something. And it's like, this should be the best of the best. And you've got to take care in it. There is an art to writing an award entry. And so, make sure you put care and attention and you look at that going, we believe that this is the best in our category.
I would also add, and this might be controversial as well, but obviously we're not awarding form over content. The content is king, but I would, if you can design up your entry a little bit, whether that's putting some images in, playing around with the font. I mean, sometimes, the entries can be just a page and a half written in Word, and they don't, obviously if it's a great idea, we'll get it, but the judges have to work a little bit harder. Whereas if you're able to put in an image or bring it to life in other ways, you can get a lot more on a page if you design it up. So I think that's a mistake sometimes people make, that they don't realize that they have a little bit of liberty, I think, into how that looks. And I can tell you that other agencies will be giving that some time and thought, so that idea jumps off the page.
Yeah, I would say also think about, what are the requirements? So there's an opportunity for you to include supplementary material, right? That doesn't have to be a lot of stuff, but I know for a fact that when people include like a short video or, something along those lines, that really helps bring it to life, right? So you've got the words on the page, but you've also got something that is really visual, that whether that's coverage or that's a case study, that thing that you've done afterwards, or it's even your launch film, short film or whatever it is, just to really, have it jump off the page at you. I think that really, really helps give it color. I would say, even if you're just working within the words on the page, adding a quote from your client or a quote from a key stakeholder or, something really impactful always helps as well. So it's not just like one long monologue across the different categories. I think, whatever you can do to help make it pop, right, is only going to help you. I think another pitfall, actually, which seems really silly, but actually happens every year, regardless of what category, what judging panel I'm on, is that without fail, there is one or two that are just in the wrong category, right? Someone has written the entry, and a lot of the time it does come down to, oh, well, we'll just try to get our money's worth and put it in, a lot of places we've got approval to submit it, right? So we'll put it up a bunch of places, but I've judged categories that were media relations that were, the campaign had no media relations, and so as a judge, it is a bit of a waste of time to say, okay, and a waste of that agency's money and time to do that. So I think just think really carefully about the category that you are entering. And if you are entering multiple categories, make sure that you're tweaking it so that it makes sense, right? So there's nothing wrong with putting it into multiple places, but it just needs to be, a right fit. So it sounds very common sense, but it trips up a lot of people. I also, one of the things that is kind of unclear sometimes is if it's an in-house entry, but then the submission might have been done by the agency, like, been put together by an agency. I think one thing that we have had multiple debates about as a kind of a judging panel is, well, who did this work? Was this an in-house team or was this the agency team? And it's fine if you have agency support, right? But just make it clear for us so that like we're not having to try to fill in the blanks. Because I think we're having to hold this work up as this is the best, in an in-house category. So we want to make sure that we're giving it to the in-house team that actually did that work. So I would just say where there are partnerships maybe across different agencies, or, just make sure you're giving credit where credit is due. And so that it makes it easy for us to distinguish like where that work is being done.
Yeah, brilliant. But on the format of the entries as well, we have slightly changed that this year. So previously it was max 1,000 words over 2 pages. We've extended that out now, so it's still 1,000 words, but it can be over 4 pages. So if you do want to bring it more to life, add in more images, then you can do so. And as I think Joe mentioned, we've also got the supplementary material, so you can add an extra document alongside that, as well as videos to bring everything to life. So yeah, on the point of categories, as you mentioned, Ishtar, some people seem to just enter maybe not always the right ones. I've definitely seen that as well from looking at some comments from previous awards. Are there any categories which you think are overlooked almost, and I suppose a nice or a surprising one that people maybe should actually think about entering? Phil?
Well, I was going to say, I think you've sort of made a point I was going to make, which is when you go into award season, it's worth looking at the previous categories, because you'll see how many have been shortlisted. And to your point, there are some categories that get less entries through. And so if you've got a campaign that, again, naturally fits within there, then that should incentivize you, quite honestly, more to enter that, because you've probably got whatever percent more chance of winning, because it won't be as popular. Whereas, media relations campaign of the year is going to be the biggest category, most entries, etc. So, it's very, very competitive. So, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there will be categories where you have much, much fewer entries. Therefore, give yourself a good chance if you do everything that we have guided you on today.
Yeah, I think from looking back to last year, I think sometimes the sector categories don't get as much love. And I think Phil is right. People have a tendency to put campaigns into either media relations or consumer campaign or high budget, or whichever one it might be. But things like automotive or fashion, or it varies depending on the year, but there will be perhaps those industry sector specific categories that might be a better fit for your campaign. And from memory, those weren't as full with entries than the media relations one.
And I definitely say, on the drier side, the B2B ones, again, not as popular to enter. Therefore, if you can just have a spark within there, trust me, experience being on the table. People just need one reason to give you a win in some of these categories where it's truly delivered. So B2B, I think a little bit of creativity, a little bit of spark, a little bit of impact, and you've probably got more chance than on some more consumer sides.
Yeah, and I would say, I think just sit critically. So what I do with my marketing team, when we're looking at our, what we're going to put forward, is that we sit down with the categories and we say, okay, and tell me about these campaigns, right? Like, tell me about the campaign. What was the impact? What were we trying to achieve? And then we look at it and we say, okay, for this campaign, where do we think it fits? Right? And then if we're tossing up between 2 or 3 categories, we make a judgment call and say, okay, well, we could put it into consumer, we could put it into, NGO, or we could put it into here. And then we say, okay, actually, I think we're probably going to have the best shot at these 2. Whereas like consumer we know there's going to be a lot of competition or more competition, or sometimes we'll put it into both, right? Like, we'll give ourselves kind of a fighting chance. But I think you have to, especially because it does cost for each entry. So I think you really want to look critically at which category do you think you have the best shot at. So yeah, I would just say like take a second, and especially if you're submitting multiple entries, and some of them might be in the same category, I would try to avoid that if you can, right? If you've got sent from the same agency in the same category, like that's going to be tough.
Brilliant, thanks. And just as you were speaking there, I just had a little sneaky look at our entries from last year. So I'm going to give a little insight to anyone that's taken the time to join us. So yeah, there's definitely categories which are, or at least last year, weren't as popular as the others. So the likes of the Employee Engagement Award, PR Leader of the Year, the Corporate Financial and Investor Relations Award, in-house categories I always think aren't as popular as the sorry, go ahead, Phil.
No, absolutely. Massive shout out. One of the discussions that I remember we had last year, probably every year, is how can we encourage? So I'd be saying to people here, encourage your direct clients, your actual clients to enter. It's maybe not as straightforward from a budgeting point of view, but the number of entries for direct clients, it could be a 50-50 shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, brilliant. There's another question here from the audience about supporting materials, which we just mentioned. When are the supporting materials looked at? Will you be marked down for not submitting them? Just from a sort of admin point of view, no, you won't be marked down necessarily. It's not a requirement. What we say is it's supporting materials are to help judges when they are sort of somewhat undecided between two or maybe more categories. It helps them maybe just give that extra mark to a particular submission. That's from my side though, just in terms of you guys as judges, is that right? Or do you always look at the supporting materials, or do you mainly just look at it just to help kind of if you've got a couple which you can't quite decide between? Ishtar, you're nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the part about when are they reviewed, they're reviewed at the same time. Well, and this is like that's just how I do mine. Is like when you go into the portal, is you look at the entry, and then the supporting material is able to be viewed or downloaded at the same time. So I always read the entry first, and then kind of view the supporting material like right after. So in terms of like when, it's like you got to get that in at the same time, right? Otherwise, we won't have it there when we're reviewing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's it's not essential, but it does just help bring that color, bring that extra, spark. So, an entry that I might have thought was, really good, then becomes like amazing when it has that, that extra flavor.
Yeah, I tend to look at, I do work a bit like Ishtar. I work through the entries. I probably put more energy and attention on the main entry form. And then I will sort of dip into the supporting material. So I will have a look at perhaps if there's imagery or if there's a quick film. And you're right, I think Ishtar does a great job at just bringing to life what it is that you've just read. So I don't think there's any harm in doing it. I don't think, but equally, I think if you've got everything on the page in the actual entry or across the 4 pages, and you've got images there and you've got links, then a lot of it, you'll probably get a good sense of whether a campaign is a contender just from the initial entry.
We've got another question here from Erin, who is saying, can you give any standout examples of criteria for individual categories? Sorry, I read that very badly. Let me say that again. Can you give any standout examples of criteria for individual categories? In terms of the criteria for the individual categories, we look at leadership, initiative, performance and contribution, colleague client references and a personal statement. I'm going to also just paste the link to our entry toolkit in the chat so everyone can have a look at that. Ishtar, any thoughts on any standouts you've seen with the individual entries?
Yeah, I was wondering if they were asking about the entries for individuals, right? I'm not, or if they were just talking about entries overall. Because if it was for individuals, I would say, for like the people categories, then I would, I always, this is just me as like how I judge, but I do kind of look for like the trifecta, which is like, what have you done, for your team? What have you done for the business? And what have you done for your community or like, outside in the industry? And because I think that's what makes a standout practitioner. I think it's not just about being good at your job, because that's what we expect, everyone to do. And I think so most people can cover, I think it's like the three-legged stool, right? Like most people can cover two of those, but what makes a really standout practitioner is like the extra bit. And so I think when I'm looking at the people specific categories, that's what I'm really looking at.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's the same as the kind of campaign entries as well, that it's about a compelling story. And sometimes that comes across in an interview rather than just on paper, but you get to it quite quickly when you're doing those personal interviews and you hear the journey that people have been on, and it kind of comes to life. And as Ishta was saying earlier, sometimes people fail to put some things in their entry, which actually when you meet them, you're like, okay, I get it. I understand the journey that you've been on and what you've achieved, and that's really remarkable. So I think don't be too modest as well in the entry form.
Great. You've all been obviously on our judging panel, but you've also all been involved with your own entries at our awards and maybe others. What do you think are the biggest benefits of entering the awards? Because it, as mentioned before, it does take a financial commitment, but also time and effort to put a good entry together. What have you guys seen as sort of the main benefits from entering previously? Jo, if we go back to you.
Yeah, should I kick off? We're addicted to awards, actually. we're like an awards junkie. So I was actually tallying up. I think we've had 1,000 shortlists. So we've been going 11 years, and we won about 400 awards. So I think we've obviously entered a lot. And the reason we do it, I think, is severalfold. Firstly, I think it helps build fame and credibility for an agency if the work that you're doing is award-winning. I mean, obviously not, but I think it definitely helps you build your own recognition of the agency in the industry. It keeps your clients happy. Who doesn't love having a piece of work that wins an award? But I think most importantly, it rewards your team. We all have worked with teams of people who work tremendously hard, and there is, it's great to work from something that then gets some industry recognition, and you get to go along to the event, or you celebrate it as a team back at base if it's a winner. So I think those are the reasons to do it. But I think it's also been quite good from a new business perspective, that I think if you start to have a bit of a reputation as an agency or an in-house team that is doing good work, you will find that other clients maybe come and knock on your door, but also you retain and attract good people as well, because people want to work on fun things that other people in the industry notice and recognize and reward. So for us, it's been, I guess, part of our agency strategy it's been definitely kind of central to how we've run the agency. Either that or, we're just very, very fickle and shallow people. just like to enter awards, but I don't think it's that. They definitely pay dividends.
Yeah, and just to build on that, when I first set up Broadcast Revolution 4 years ago, in the first couple of years, the awards that we entered were predominantly the agency award, the new agency award, and it was lovely to win lots of awards. But actually, in the following 2 years, we've won, and we did win some in the first 2 years, but in the next 2 years, winning the campaign awards is so much more rewarding for a number of the reasons that Jo's said. And so looking at it as a business owner 4 years in, I really do focus my attention on the campaign work, because it really just is it's the biggest sort of well done that not I can give, but the industry can give to the team for the work that they've done. And that makes me most proud. The agency's fine, and hopefully it may win awards as an agency in the future. But really, for me, campaign work is the be all and end all for all the reasons Jo's already stated.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't have that much to add. I think I completely agree with all of those things. But I think the one extra thing, and maybe that's just because with my health marketing team, I see this as very much like a great development opportunity within the team as well. I think understanding how awards, the awards process, how it works, helping some of the team kind of like feeder into, what goes into the judging process, how that all comes together, having them then facilitate with different teams, how those entries come to life. Then everyone really shares in the, in the success when we get a short list, when we get a win. I think it becomes not just about, okay, this one person or this one team is doing great things, but it really is, part of, as Joe says, like part of the culture. And so I've seen that firsthand, and I really do think that is a great kind of learning and development opportunity within the team as well.
Definitely, yeah. And it's a really fun night. So that alone is
that's always, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we'll come up to about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the chat. But just sticking then at kind of rounding up from my side. So what have been your biggest learnings? So either from the perspective of entering or judging, what have been your biggest learnings from being involved with the UK Awards? Phil, maybe if we can go to you.
Listen, the reason I love judging awards is getting that insight of what the best work in the industry is. And so that's why I love to give my time to be a judge. I think I get disappointed when I see, to repeat, BAU work that is like, it's grand, but it just doesn't stand out in any shape or form. And yet when you find that nugget, the one or two or three brilliant pieces in there, it's inspiring. And that's what I'm doing it for. It means that I have to be better, my team have to be better, because this is the best work that's out there. And I love that. So for me, that's why I do it, and that's what I try to get out of it, and that's what hopefully continues to raise the bar if there are other people that take the same thing out of it that I do.
Yeah, Phil, I agree with that. I think great work, right? And you get that kind of tingly feeling when you read an entry and you go, oh, I really, really wish I'd had that idea. And you're just kind of gutted that it wasn't your idea. And that's really inspiring. And I think that works on both levels. I think I would only put forward the work will elicit that response, because Danielle, although I don't want to put people off entering, I know that we as an agency at Hope and Glory, we look at our work over a 12-month period and go, look, where are the potential award-worthy pieces of work? And we sort of know that before we enter it. And if we're not doing enough of it, that tends to be a bit of a wake-up call to us and going, okay, we need to get some more ideas out the door, because maybe we need a stronger set of campaigns to kind of enter. So I think so that knowing that it's a really special piece of work, I think it's a privilege to judge. Quite frankly, it's wonderful to be able to look at that work, and you do really. I take my hats off every time to the people who've done it, and just think that's really inspiring. So that would be the bit that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I would add from the side of the learnings from entering, I would say resource it properly, and plan enough ahead. I think it's one of those things where teams are really good at getting work done. We're not so good at stopping when it's done and putting it down on paper, right? Or taking a second to think about how great it was, why it was great, all of those things, or sharing that even within your own teams, right? So I think we're always on to what's the next thing, and so I think it's a great way to showcase it within your own agency, within your own team, but also I think just make sure you're planning enough ahead, because it does take work, right? I'm in the health sector, so those take extra approvals, extra time to get through. They're extra sensitive, and so I think just understand that when you're going in, and just factor that all in, but take everyone on the journey with you.
Lovely. And I don't think we've had any more audience questions come through, so I'm going to finish up with just asking you all, if you don't mind, just sharing one final top tip for anyone listening now, about to start working on their entry, Ishtar, we start with you. Top tip.
Mine's going to be like a combo, but I would say keep it simple and make it shine. So like definitely like your storyline should just, that red thread, right? That's easy to understand. I would actually start with drafting your executive summary, which is, your like your 100 words of like what your campaign was, did, your insight, right? And so if you can start with that, your kind of elevator pitch of what the campaign was, and it's really strong, I think that will set you up right from the beginning, and make it shine. So like, don't forget to, elaborate on what made it special, why this was different, why it was inspirational, so that, to Joe's point, to Phil's point, that when we read it as a judge, we say, wow, like that was amazing. Like, I wish I worked on that campaign, or I saw that was excellent, right? You just get that feeling. So I think if you can, it's like with any storytelling, you want to leave them feeling a certain type of way. So I would work backwards from that. What's the reaction you want from the judges, and how are you going to get that?
Great. And Phil?
Did it make an impact? More than coverage. I'll finish how I started. More than just coverage. Did it make an impact? And how was that? And show that, and then work from there.
Okay. And Joe?
Shall I finish off? Yeah, I mean, I think my advice would be go all in. And like, if you're going to do it and you've got a great piece of work, give it the time and the attention that it deserves. I mean, don't do it half-heartedly, because I think that way, you've kind of wasted the entry fee. You're probably not going to get out of it what you need to actually put a certain amount in, and that's not to put people off, but I think it's just to say, be a bit tough on yourself. It's just a good piece of work, and then if you're going to do it, you've got to be in it to win it, haven't you? So go in and jump in with both feet and kind of tell us the story. I'm looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Well, Joe, Ishtar, Phil, thank you for joining us again. I know you've done a few of these, so much appreciated. Some really useful tips shared today. So yeah, thank you again. And to everyone listening, hope you found that useful. We have got our early bird deadline for the awards coming up on the 16th of June, and then the final deadline is the 14th of July. So got some time, but as Ishtar said, it can take time to put together that really good entry. So don't leave it to the last minute. But yeah, for now, thanks so much everyone for joining. Good luck with the entries, and hopefully see you at the awards. Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.